Well, welcome everybody to episode 2 of Tosot Time. And I tell you what, everybody, I am so excited about our guest today, Mr. Bill Rao, formerly of Mitsubishi. If you've ever wondered how Mitsubishi became the market leader, how they became the brand name leader in brand recognition, you're about to find out from the man himself, Mr. Bill Rao. Bill Rao was at the helm of Mitsubishi during those formative years, all the way into their success as we know them now. So, without any further ado, let's bring in Bill Rao. Well, I want to welcome our guest, and that is Mr. Bill Rao. And Bill will probably get upset with me with how I'm going to boast about him, but just cannot be more thrilled and honored, frankly, to have Bill participate in just the second episode of Tosot Time. So, Bill, thanks so much, and welcome to Tosot Time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Great, man. So, Bill, please share with our audience a little bit about yourself, specifically what you were doing before Mitsubishi. What led you up to that time in your career and your life?
When I left college, I was living in southwestern Ohio, so I went to work for a steel company. That was in the late 70s, early 80s. And at that time, the Japanese were just devastating the steel business. So ultimately, that whole thing just closed out. I went to work for a small company in Columbus, Ohio. That didn't work out too well. I went to work for Lennox.
Oh,
And
okay.
I spent 8 years working for Lennox in Cincinnati, in Columbus, and then out in Sacramento, ultimately moving to Dallas when they did their, whatever they called it at the time, their project to more centralized Lennox operations. So
Gotcha.
I was there for a while, there being in Texas for 2, 3 years. And the opportunity came up to interview with this organization called Mitsubishi in the air conditioning business. And one thing led to another. And I ended up spending over 19 years with Mitsubishi.
Wow. Wow. And the rest is history, as they say. But we're going to talk about that history. Bill, one of the questions that I was most anxious to ask you is tell us about the earliest form of the mini split. Just how primitive was it compared to what we know today?
That's a fun question. But I was thinking about this the other night, and the reason is there were heat pumps, heating, cooling, or cooling only. And the Japanese had this idea that what they needed to do was sell systems only. So think about that for a second. You're importing a matched indoor-outdoor unit from Japan, and it's only available for purchase that way. And if somebody drops an outdoor unit or smashes an indoor unit, guess what? You get to buy another system.
Oh, wow.
Now they were for the time sophisticated. There was a lot of reluctance on the part of contractors and distributors to get involved because there was still a very heavy use of electronics in ways that we had not experienced in our market.
Right.
I wouldn't say that they were primitive or crude or anything like that. They were, and some of them may still be running. I mean, they had an enormous lifespan, some of them.
I see them from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you'd look at one, you'd say, okay, that's the same thing it is now. I can't remember what the Sears were on them. I don't recall that specific piece of information, but they were nice units. They were quiet. They were effective at what they did. They were applied generally in problematic situations where you just couldn't get an answer for a central ducted type system, or you didn't want a room unit, or you didn't want a PTAC. You needed an alternative, and that's how they started in the market.
Yeah. When I do come across them, Bill, from time to time, I always notice that the original wall mount evaporator, very large, compared to what we see today,
Yeah.
and always wood grain.
Yeah.
There was
They
everything
love
in the 70s was wood grain, right?
they loved the wood grain, right? I was fortunate to be coming in at the time when that was kind of fading away.
Good.
Although you could still, as I recall, still in the early '90s, you could order a wood grain or whatever we called non-wood grain. But the wood grain thing kind of ran its course, and we
It
went to
did.
the more neutral Munsell color. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always think about another mini split manufacturer that some years back, not all that long ago, actually came out with an evaporator that actually had a picture on it. It was,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like a Velvet Elvis. It wasn't even a nice picture.
Yeah,
But
that
anyway,
that particular company is still around, and they
I know.
still
Yes.
they still hawk that thing. I have a hard time believing that the average homeowner would prefer to have that on their wall because it's at an awkward height. It has to
Yeah.
be for uh, for air circulation, and you get like this perfectly square picture hanging on the wall. Who hangs perfectly square pictures without frame? Anyway, they've had some success with it.
They have. Hey, in one of the last AHR expos, I think it was the one a couple of years back in Orlando. There was actually a company that had a flat screen TV that was an evaporator. Think of that.
That's different. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
would be different.
yeah. Well, Bill, look, I've got to believe that selling mini splits in North America in the early days had to be an uphill battle. I suspect some of your friends may have even thought that you had lost your mind. Just how difficult was it selling the concept of a mini split at that time?
Well, I used to when I heard the fax machine ringing because that's how we transmitted our orders. I'd go to the fax machine to take a look at the order. it
Wow.
was it was difficult. The market was when I joined Mitsubishi. I guess the market was we were in second place at about $16 million. So the whole market was less than $50 million distributed.
Second place to, let me guess, Sanyo?
Senior, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it was the whole market was maybe $50 million
yeah.
in the early '90s. It was a very very small market, and it stayed small. It was an uphill battle for uh, uh, until the late '90s. I think by the time we got to the late '90s, we realized, okay, we can make this work. So yeah, it was an uphill climb. People thought we had lost our minds. Nobody's going to pay that kind of money for an air conditioner. Nobody wants to see that thing hanging on the wall. Nobody
Yeah,
wants to deal with the electronics. You've heard it all.
sure.
It's just never going to. And the product clearly was not designed for the U.S. market. I mean, that wasn't their intention. It was we've got some extra capacity. Let's see if we can sell some of these in the United States. And it took a while to figure out how to unlock all the locks for keeping the market closed, but we finally did.
So it wasn't a mission of Mitsubishi to essentially attack North America. It was just simply that they had product in other places that they could share with North America and find a place for it, find a home for it.
Yeah, my sense is that we didn't talk about it too much
Yeah,
from that standpoint because it didn't seem really relevant. Although
sure.
I did express to Mitsubishi management on more than one occasion that if you really want to be if you want to be a true international supplier, you've got to have a position in the North American market. You have to because it's the biggest air conditioning market that there is. At
Right.
that time, it certainly was. Um, and it's going to be harder than it might be otherwise to do that with a product that has no tradition, history, experience, expressed desire. Nobody needs it. Nobody wants it. They don't know that it exists, so they can't ask for it. So, I mean,
Right.
we're really pushing a rope up a hill, but if that's what you guys want to do, that's what we'll do. And so we did. And
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I had a lot of people on board at the time, and they know who they are. That they were like me. They didn't understand that we couldn't do what we were trying to do. So we just figured out a way to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Was Alan Zawacki one of those people in the early stages?
He was in relatively early. He was not in right at the. He was in after I joined up. But since we mentioned names, I think guys like Bud Nardello and Craig Little, who were at various times sales and VP of sales, and our tech guys, Gary Nettinger at the time, and Tony Hayes, John Capilando, who handled um, logistics, and logistics were a key uh, point of differentiation, I guess, for Mitsubishi, because somehow we managed to work with a 6 month lead time and yet keep product in stock. So,
Wow.
I mean, we had a lot of people that did a lot of really hard work, um, and
Yeah.
we had to figure out a way to make this acceptable to the marketplace. Having product in stock, having parts, having technical support, all of those were absolutely critical to getting over those early hurdles.
I didn't even think of that, Bill. The logistics that you guys had to deal with very early on. Of course, now it's second nature to us. All these products come from the Asian markets, but
Right.
at that time, yeah, that was new. Just finding sources to get the product here in a timely manner had to be incredibly challenging, I'm sure.
It was. Yeah, it was. It
Yeah.
was a. But one of the successes that we had a little later on was we were able to go through about a 5 year time frame with a seasonal product with a 6 month lead time. We went about 5 years with no stockouts. So that tells you the capability of the people
Yeah.
and their ability to analyze data and figure things out and understand underneath what was going on.
Yeah. And you say data, very minimal data, right? I mean, you guys were the trailblazers with
Right.
this, so there wasn't a
We
lot of precedents to look at.
right. We
Yeah.
couldn't look at what anybody else had done. We had to figure
Right.
out what we were trying to do for ourselves, and that's a point of departure that's not really in your notes, but it's worth talking about for just a second
Sure.
because what happened at Mitsubishi has not happened based on my experience at any of the rest of the companies. People think that what differentiates is the product. Well, I've got news for them. Everybody's product is pretty doggone good.
You're right.
As Joe Mastriani, my ad guy, used to say, table stakes are a quality product. If you don't have a quality product, you're not in the game. So what we were able to do was to take a quality product, and nobody argues that Mitsubishi didn't have a quality product. It did. They're all quality products. All of them are
Right.
good. But we built a culture around mini splits. And building a culture around mini splits is not the same as hiring people who have air conditioning experience or who are good engineers, who are talented salespeople. It is an intention to put together an organization with a single minded focus and an organization wherein people can trust one another.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And for almost 20 years, it was highly, highly successful. And we're grateful for that.
Well, Bill, clearly, you're one of your many talents is in team building. Absolutely, and what a team you built. Those
Yeah.
people that you mentioned and the success that you guys enjoyed as a result of that team. Speaks for itself. It goes to leadership. I'm very interested in different leadership techniques, and I'm going off script here, so to speak, but I think of the mentors in my own life. In my
Mhm.
early career, I needed a mentor, quite frankly, who was somewhat of a Marine, someone who was tough on me because I was a jerk, right? And I was young and stupid and I wanted to party and everything else that young people want to do. And at the time, there were moments where I hated that guy. But looking back, it was exactly what I need. I actually had the opportunity to speak to. I'm speaking specifically of a gentleman named Harry Eckloff, um,
Mhm.
who is an icon in manufacturers rep agency. But I actually had an opportunity to speak with him shortly before he passed, and tell him that he was my Vince Lombardi. He was tough on me, but looking back on it, it was exactly what I needed. And now in my career, Bill, I have Guillaume Kelly, who you know so well,
Hmm.
and I'm twice Guillaume's age, and I'm learning more about leadership from that man, possibly than anybody I've ever had in my career. And
Hmm.
it's a different style, completely
Hmm.
different style,
Hmm.
where it's softer, it's kinder, quite frankly. And at
Hmm.
61 years old, that's exactly what I need. So it's amazing the different types of leaderships that you find in your career and your life, huh?
Right. Right. One of the guys that was absolutely instrumental in my uh, development within the HVAC industry was a guy by the name of Dick Ansley. Now, you're there's nobody listening to this podcast right now, with a couple of possible exceptions, who are going to know who Dick Ansley was. But he
Yeah.
was the branch manager for Lennox Industries, who hired me in Cincinnati when I was back in the days when they were called dealer marketing advisors. And
Okay.
Dick Ansley had a capability of working with people that is by far and away the most effective, I think, that I'd ever seen. He called me in once to chew me out about something. I don't remember what.
Yeah.
And when he was done, I said, "Wow, you made me feel so great about this whole thing. Could you chew me out again?"
You're right.
But you didn't want to disappoint him.
Yeah,
So you
that's the
knew what he
key, isn't it?
wanted.
That's the key with a good leader.
Right.
You don't want to disappoint them.
Right. Exactly. So you're right. There's a lot of different ways to lead. Sometimes it takes a very firm hand and you have to be very upfront and very in people's faces. Other times you can, again, if you create that dynamic and that culture where people know they can trust you,
Yeah,
then you are way ahead uh, of you're way ahead of the game.
no doubt about it. Well, that's cool. Bill, uh, where did you find early success? What geographic area was the first boom, if you will, for
Yeah.
for the Mitsubishi product?
Yeah. No question. It was Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Hawaii was at a very early point in the development of Mitsubishi. Hawaii was 25% of our annual business.
That
And
initially surprises me, but then when I think about it for a moment, it doesn't, because I would imagine that they were used to seeing this type of product, this type of
right.
equipment. Yes? Yeah.
Yeah. There's obviously a heavy Asian influence in Hawaii and has been for years. Um, Ronnie Nakamura ran the distributor over there. And Ronnie was born in the USA, but clearly with a name like Nakamura, there's a little bit of heritage there.
Sure.
He understood the market, which was critical, but he traveled widely and he understood the application of the product. And he was able to breathe life into that market, unlike anybody I had seen uh, do up to that point. He understood the product, he understood the background of the product, he understood the market, and he could make things happen.
Right.
Actually, now when you go from Hawaii, the next big place where we had some significant early success was New York, and
Hmm.
that would have been a function both of the capability of the distributor up there and the construction of the market, construction, you know, construction patterns of the market being
Right.
high density housing, need for quiet on the outside unit. Uh, and New York
Yeah.
was an early success as well.
Interesting. And I would imagine as well with New York, um, travelers there, there's some money there, there's some cash
Oh,
there.
yeah. Oh,
Again,
yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
concept would not have been particularly foreign to them, and there's some cash, disposable income there as well.
Well, they could get into places in some of those high rise buildings where they just didn't have a good answer.
Right.
And, you could present this stuff on the price point in New York was astronomical, but it's New York and it solved a problem. The people could afford it. And so they were early adopters.
No doubt. So, Bill, do you have a memory of what your in the earliest years, what your total sales were, and what you eventually brought it to before you left?
Yes. We were at $16 million in 1993.
Okay.
And that was down from $20 million in 1992. I wasn't there in 92. I didn't join till late 93. There was a fall off. The market was actually kind of moving away from us. There wasn't a lot of interest, frankly. When I left, we were about 30 times that.
Wow. Wow.
So we were able to, and I keep saying we because it wasn't me, it was us. We were able
Sure.
to unlock the market and had success beyond what anybody ever expected.
Right. Right. No, that's incredible. Bill, I used to travel with this gentleman who was much older than me at the time, and we used to go and speak to wholesalers and distributors up in the Catskill Mountains of New York.
Yeah.
And he was an older gentleman, and he knew very well the history of the Catskills. And the Catskills, of course, had their heyday in the 50s and the 60s. And then once people got on airplanes, nobody wanted to go to the Catskills anymore, right? It was old hat. And I think the same situation kind of affected the mini split market. And you tell me if I'm wrong. As people got on planes and traveled, they saw the wall-mounted evaporator in a hotel room or in a restaurant or in a private home, and it became more commonplace to them. It more acceptable. And did that not have an influence here? I would think it did in North America, just as people began to see it more often everywhere else in the world. It made it a little bit more acceptable here in the States. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's a case to be made for that. I think. I don't believe that it was ever a primary driver because,
Okay.
Even though a lot of people fly, the number of people who fly into separate individuals who fly internationally on a regular basis, that number goes way down.
Right.
They're looking at it, they might remember something about it. But what really tripped it was, again, it was Joe Mastriani, our advertising guy, and his decision that what we needed to do was to make ourselves visible in professional golf.
Oh.
And you say, okay, why professional golf? Well, the first thing about it is that is the demographic you're talking about, people who have broader international experience.
Yeah.
And they could afford what we were talking about.
Yeah.
So you take those two things and put them together, and then we advertise to them through the Hawaii tournament and through other sponsorships that Mitsubishi did, and then just generally being on the Golf Channel, being on golf broadcasts. And as we suspected, one of the things that did was, it made it acceptable to consumers, but it made it acceptable to distributors.
Yeah.
Distributor owners particularly, and then contractors. So the market, the distributors, the contractors all began to see this stuff as being a real source of answers for real problems. And working with the distribution owners was absolutely critical in creating a dynamic where they wanted the product to succeed so that they would then incentivize and reinforce the message going out to their contractors. And it kind of went from there.
And clearly Mitsubishi to this day enjoys the residual effect of that name recognition. I always say, if you stop a soccer mom in the street and ask her to name a mini split company, if she can name one at all,
Right.
it's Mitsubishi. There's no
Mitsubishi.
question about it.
Right.
So so interesting to see how your marketing people targeted golf. I would have never guessed that, but boy, does that make perfect sense, doesn't it?
It does. And you got to keep in mind, in those days, the numbers that we needed to be successful were relatively small.
Right.
So we could go after a small piece of a giant market in order to get a toehold. Now, we could post numbers that were, for us, now, the mainline companies would look at it and say, well, that's nothing. But for us, they were real numbers. And it opened up opened us up to hold so that the company could hold the position even after they gave up a lot of uh, what was going on after I left. They made a lot of different decisions. A lot of things changed,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like, we used to talk about it. It's kind of like Kleenex. It is the market leader. It is the company that opened it up and will remain for generations the number one company in people's minds. They'll think of that one first because we were first.
No question. But again, a tribute clearly to you and your crew at the time, there, because Mitsubishi, as you just said, will always enjoy that.
Yeah.
That brand recognition.
Right.
They are it when it comes to brand recognition. No question about it. So cool. It's interesting, Bill. You talk about golf being used in that day,
Mhm.
and I see automobile racing being used in that way today, where so many HVAC companies are getting into NASCAR specifically,
Mhm.
and because the viewership is so strong.
Mhm.
Again, the demographic is the demographic that we go
Mhm.
after, so it's something that
Mhm.
we're looking into as well at some point, to be honest with
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so I guess NASCAR is the new golf. I don't know. Yeah. So look, Bill, in the early days, I suspect cooling only units were the lion's share of the market. Am I
Yeah.
correct in that? Or you did mention that the heat pump was available early on, but my guess, and that's all it would be, my guess is that the cooling only had to been the lion's share. Am I right?
As I recall, my recollection would be that yes, you're right. The heat pumps were still suffering from so much of the bad press from the 70s and the 80s, and
Yeah.
people did not want to deal with heat pumps. They didn't like heat pumps. They stayed away from heat pumps, and it took several years, and it took some impressive operating statistics and some wins in the marketplace and people having success to where heat pumps moved from an also ran to becoming the way to heat and air condition. Particularly now, we're still talking about trouble spaces, but at least we
Right.
were moving in the right direction.
Yeah. I know I've shared with you my background and my father's background, how I got
Mhm.
into the business. My pops was in the boiler manufacturing business virtually his entire adult life. And he had a joke, but it was one of those jokes that had a lot of truth in it. He used to say that you would never install a heat pump north of Richmond, Virginia,
Right.
because
Yep.
back in the 70s, when he was at his heyday in his business, a heat pump quit at about 47-degree outdoor air. That was it. That was all you were going to get.
Yeah. Right.
So it was just too much of a liability to go anywhere north of Richmond, Virginia with it.
Right.
But look
And
at where we are today with negative 22 Fahrenheit. It's crazy, the outdoor, the low ambient capability with heating nowadays.
talking to people who live above the Mason-Dixon line, basically, about using heat pumps as a primary source of heat, that took a lot of talking. That took
Yeah,
years to develop.
yeah.
But you're right. Technically, these products are amazing.
It's amazing nowadays. Again, and SEER ratings that I never thought I would say in my lifetime, never
Oh
less my
yeah,
career.
yeah,
38 SEER. Where do you? It,
right.
it amazes me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So who was some of the earliest wholesale distributors in North America that got on board with you? And what was it that got them to write the purchase order, quite frankly? I would have to have been, I would have to believe it. It was a huge leap of faith for the early distributors that kind of started the journey with you. Tell us about that a little bit.
yeah. Well, we had some gifted sales guys, and they were
Yeah.
able to create an effective means of conveying the potential of mini splits. So we had the names are not all going to come back to me. We had air conditioning warehouse in Hawaii, uh, big Mitsubishi, a very important Mitsubishi customer.
Yeah.
And in Utah, particularly with the church, we had some people who were very effective at talking to them and uh, getting their engineers to realize the capability of the products. So we had some early success with the church in Utah. Uh, Abco Supply in New York
Oh,
was
sure.
a
Yeah.
major player. early on. Mingledorff's in Atlanta was a big company. We had some success in San Francisco as well with the carrier distributor, and Jim Lazor is going to, if he's still among us, would kick me for not remembering his company's name, but it has been about 20 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, the carrier distribution in San Francisco was also uh, critical in the early days.
Right. Again, going back to Hawaii, one of the last times I was in Hawaii, sure enough, there was a mini split in a hotel room. I had never seen a mini split in a hotel room before,
Mhm,
where the outdoor unit was literally on the balcony and what have you.
mhm.
And when I inquired about it with some of the local guys there, they told me that hotels were built without AC, without air conditioning back in the day. It
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
they felt it wasn't needed. You would open up the balcony
Right.
door and you would get the trade winds, and it just wasn't necessary. But
Right.
now,
Mhm.
people won't stay in a hotel room if it doesn't have air conditioning.
Right.
So the mini split was the perfect application. So again, Hawaii obviously being a strong initial market and continuing to this day, I would think.
Yep. As far as I know, I haven't seen the numbers obviously in a number of years, but just a great place. Lots of construction going on all the time over
Yeah.
there. Energy costs are through the roof in Hawaii. So
Yes.
chillers are fabulously expensive because there's an electric charge and there's the water charge. Having to pay for water for chillers, it
Yeah.
gets to be
Yeah.
phenomenally expensive. So again, it's a great market.
No doubt. So Bill, what year was the major turning point where you knew mini splits had kind of found their place, and it was no longer a question of who would buy them, but rather how many
Oh,
competitors were going to be following your lead? What was that moment in time, if you can, where you realized, you know what, we turned a corner here?
it was at our distributor meeting in Hawaii in 2005. And it was exactly at that time when all the entire market went, wait a second, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And you say, what was it? And I'm looking at a letter on my wall right over there, signed by George H.W. Bush. He
Ah.
spoke the week after W. Now, let's not get into politics because I'm not a big Bush fan these days, but W had just been reinaugurated the week before. So this was
Right.
right after that. George H.W. was number 3 on Al Qaeda's hit list. So
Uh,
the security was pretty intense. But having him there to speak at that meeting absolutely flipped a switch in the industry.
wow.
There's no question. Our growth the following year was 60%.
Whoa. Wow.
1 year,
And
year over year.
and was it just a matter of having a president at your meeting that
Yeah,
impactful, obviously?
I mean, that was really significant. Let's not
Sure,
misunderstand, but
sure.
we had been seeding the ground for years. Within my experience, there's this technique called mapping that I've learned from one of the smartest men I ever knew, Richard Hodap, still teaching mapping. And mapping basically shows you the various roles within a decision process. There's decision owners, decision evaluators, decision implementers. Our industry is an implementer industry, meaning that the reason there is such a focus on things like price is because ultimately that's where the industry is comfortable. Now, there's also an evaluator emphasis on the commercial side, and the engineers handle that. But the decision made while I was at Mitsubishi was we're going to work what's called the owner loop. We're going to talk to business owners. We're going to talk to the C level at the distributors. We're going to involve them in our decision process. We're going to get involved in their decision process. And so that went on for a while. That was going on in the background. And so then when we bring a former president to
Yeah.
speak to us, there is huge interest among the people that we've been trying to recruit, right? All
Sure.
of a sudden they sit up and say, wow, I own a business. I should probably pay attention. I should listen to what's going on here. I should definitely be at that meeting.
Yeah.
And that um, cemented our credibility. There's
Yeah,
no
no doubt.
question that cemented our credibility.
Fascinating. Yeah. And I had no knowledge of that. That's yeah, to have a president essentially
Yeah,
as a spokesperson, even if it's just for a
yeah.
singular meeting. Wow, how impactful.
6, 8 years earlier, it wouldn't have had the impact, but
Yeah.
we had been doing the developmental work and preparing the ground. So the timing was just exactly right.
Yeah, perfect. So, Bill, be honest with me, man. Did you know when you were leading the parade for ductless heating and cooling that someday it would become what we know it today? Did you realize in the moment just how much of a trailblazer you and your crew and Mitsubishi as a company, did you realize as it was happening what significance it would have decade or two later?
Yeah, in the first few years, no. I mean, you're just working a job trying to make something happen.
Sure.
But sometime around the new millennium, and certainly after 2005, we began talking about being on a mission to transform the HVAC industry. So we saw ourselves as transformative. And I reinforced that message every time we got together. You guys are doing something that has never been done before in this
Yeah.
market. No one has ever introduced this product to this market before. No one will ever introduce this product to this market again. You can only do it once. And it goes back to creating a culture. You got to figure out why people get out of bed every morning. And
Yeah.
and people don't get out of bed to make their boss rich. I mean, there's virtually no one out there who gets up and says, by golly, this morning I get to go help make the boss a lot of money.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just not how people are put together. So
Right.
you got to figure out what people are willing to commit themselves to, why they throw the blankets back in the morning. What is it beyond? We got to make a living, but most of us want to leave some sort of an imprint beyond just having made money.
Yes.
And we had people who were sensitive to and interested in creating fundamental change in a very staid, boring, kind of arrogant, self satisfied industry.
Yeah.
And we turned it upside down. Now,
You did.
my if I have from this perspective looking back, if I have a disappointment, it's that it hasn't gone nearly as far as it could.
Mm.
But it's still way ahead of where it was.
Oh, no question. But come on, share with us what stunted it, if that's what you're saying. What prevented it from reaching its full potential? Share.
The Again, it's the culture of the industry.
Mm.
When I had the bully pulpit, people may not have liked me. I didn't care whether they liked me or not. What I cared about was whether or not they were willing to listen to the message. And they didn't have much choice but to listen. And it made enough sense that a number of them grabbed it and it became their mission as well. But when you lose that voice, I guess, the power of what Richard Hodapp calls the implementer loop, which is where we all spend our lives, that just sucks people back into that.
Yeah.
So let's go right. Okay, that was fun and we enjoyed that 19 years. Let's go back to what we were doing before. And that's pretty much where the industry's gone. Let's just go back to what we're doing before. When Mitsubishi sold their position out to Trane, what that said was, to me, we are joining the implementer loop because we're selling out to the competition. We are no longer attempting to build an alternative, transformative position in a marketplace and lead the development of the market to the next place, wherever that may be. What we're going to do is we're going to get behind the leaders and we're going to follow them. And that to me is disappointing. I wish they hadn't done it. But so what?
Yeah.
That's up to them. They get to make that decision.
Sure. Sure. It is fascinating though, and yeah. So, Bill, what year did you leave Mitsubishi? And please share with the audience what you've been doing since.
Left in 2013, so 9 years ago.
Okay.
And, like I tell people, they were tired of me. And frankly, I was tired of them. So it was probably a good thing for everybody. I went to work for a distributor for about 6 months. It was the longest 6 months of my career because it was, again, it was an implementer business. I'm trying to talk to them about conceptually a way of doing business that was successful. And they kept talking about, no, we need to sell more. Well, if we get the concept right, we'll sell more. Well, we can't sell more if we don't get the concept right. Well, they didn't want to hear that. I went to work for Samsung. I found the Koreans to be nice people, but they're pretty doggone sure that they know what's right.
Gotcha.
And so that lasted a little bit, but ultimately that would have been frustrating too. Okay, fast forward a little bit. Met George, was Bill's boss, and Bill Kaye. We got involved with George and with Bill in Tosot. Decided that instead of, frankly, trying to make those guys in Canada rich, my son and I said, we'll just go work for ourselves. We may not get rich, but at least we can do what we want.
Yeah, yeah.
So Bill's been very helpful in helping us make that transition. Other people have been willing to support us as well, but we're acting as a manufacturer's rep, quasi distributor of Tosot product here in North Georgia.
And Bill, give the name of your company, please. Give yourself a plug.
Yeah, Affordable Ductless.
Nice.
That was my son's idea because we talked to enough people. I've got a little bit of experience, and the thing that was keeping the market from embracing our messages fully as they could was the price to the final end user was still too high. $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to air condition a room is simply not reasonable. Most people, my son analogizes it to, you go into Costco and you got $1,800 in your pocket. You want a big screen TV. Now that Sony on the wall at $4,500 looks really nice, but I got $1,800.
Right.
And that TCL, that picture's okay, and that gives me enough money to pay the taxes.
Right.
So it's do I buy the TCL, which works perfectly and has the same warranty, or do I walk out of there with nothing? Because that's my choice.
Right.
I can have something or I can have nothing.
Yeah. No, great analogy. Absolutely.
And that's where we're at. We're trying to talk to, look, the big contractors and the big distributors, they've got that cream all sucked off the top. And there's the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 installations. Have at it, guys. Do what you want.
Right.
Because there's 80% of the market is underneath that, and 80% of the market can't afford that. So we're looking for a way to make it affordable. That's what's driving us.
And so timely when you think about it, Bill, right? I always say to people who come to my training events that, post-COVID, should we ever get to a truly post-COVID situation, people who are going to be watching every penny and every dime, that's going to be even more exaggerated post-COVID. People who have been affected negatively, people who have been displaced in their careers, and what have you. You can imagine that's only going to be amplified as we move forward, at least in the short term, if not the long term. Yeah.
Well, we were talking to a guy, and he's with another manufacturer, and he was in diapers when we were doing this. I mean, so nice guy, but come on, I've been doing this for 30 years and I know a little bit about it. I don't know everything. Yeah. And he tells Nathan, he said, people always buy the best product. They always buy the best product. Price doesn't matter. Price is not an issue. And I said, what you need to do is you need to go back to him and explain on him something. That the true definition of quality is conformance to the customer's requirements.
Mm.
It's not the best. It's not the most features. It's conformance to the customer requirement. Let's go back to the
Yeah.
TV example. And if that is an acceptable definition of quality, which is the definition of quality, then price is always an issue because price is part of the customer requirement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's an arrogance out there that, well, we can get any price we want. Well, yeah, if you're willing to settle for about 6 to 8% of the potential of the market, you can. But if you really want to get into it and do business, then you're going to have to change your attitude.
No doubt about it. Yeah. Well, Bill, my friend, we're coming to the end of our time together, but I do have one last thing. So Bill, looking back, I imagine, I hope that it must be a source of great pride for you to know that you were the guy steering the ship early on with Mitsubishi, and that it ultimately became the HVAC powerhouse that we know it to be today. So I guess that's not a question, but I just want to hear from you that you recognize your significance in this market, in our business, in our trade, and that you were so influential early on. You blazed the trail that we all enjoy today, and I want to thank you on behalf of everyone in this business, whether they know you or not, or know your background, or know your iconic status. You are the singular person that I look to as the trailblazer, and I want you to recognize that.
Well, I mean, your comments, that's very touching. Thank you for that.
Oh.
But it was a team effort, as we've said. And
Sure.
what I haven't done in the course of this broadcast, and I hope this makes it to the final cut, is I haven't thanked Mitsubishi for the opportunity that they gave us. Because had they not been willing, either through benign neglect or through intent, to let us experiment with this and try this and, kind of run around with our heads like chickens with our heads cut off for a few years and figure things out, somebody else would have done it, but it wouldn't have been this team.
Sure.
And it
wouldn't have been the same.
It wouldn't have been.
It might have been as good, but it wouldn't have been the same.
They were up to the end. They were gracious. They weren't always helpful, but they allowed us to vent. They at least showed us the courtesy of listening to the things that we wanted to say. They always produced a quality product. The people that they sent over were, in almost every case, not only very, very technically good at their jobs, they were really nice people, which helps. So when you're working cross-culturally like that, having people that you want to interact with was absolutely crucial. So kudos to Mitsubishi for what they allowed us to do. And, again, I hope a lot of people see this. I didn't get the chance to mention everybody's name. There's not enough time to mention everybody's name, but you all know who you are, and you were part of something that was, I think, once in a lifetime, but it was over 19 years of the best time of my life. It really was.
I'm so pleased that it was the best time of your life, because we all enjoy the revenue, the residuals effect of what you did at the best time of your life. So again, I thank you, Bill.
Thank you for everything.
Bill, we've come to the close. I cannot thank you enough. I am truly honored that you have shared this wonderful story and your very valuable time with us today. So Bill, thank you again. And please, I love you, and we'll move forward. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Jerry. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Mr. Bill Rao. That was one of the honors of my career, quite frankly, to have that conversation with Bill, have Bill be so open about his experiences and his time at Mitsubishi. I say this about Bill, and I think I speak for everyone who's watching this and everyone in this wonderful industry of ours. All of us who enjoy working in what is the fastest growing segment of HVAC right now, which is the mini split market, owe Bill a debt of gratitude because, my friends, that man is the man that trailblazed the industry that we so enjoy right now. So, once again, thank you, Bill. And just one of the honors of my career to have that conversation with him. So, it's that time of the show where I give you Jerry's pick of the month. And my pick of the month this month is going to be very simple. Uh, Please donate anything you can, money, clothing, canned goods, to charities that are helping the people of the Ukraine. There's so many charities right now, both locally, nationally, internationally, that are directly helping the people that are suffering in the Ukraine as a result of the war there. Uh, in my little town, there's a bakery that have designed these wonderful cookies in the blue and yellow colors of the Ukraine. And the funds received from the sales of those baked goods goes directly to the people of the Ukraine. Ukrainian churches all throughout Canada and the United States. Bathica, our company, was involved in a clothing drive for up in Quebec for the people of the Ukraine. And our CEO, Guillaume Kelly, put together a wonderful offering of clothing and heavy coats and shoes and socks, all kind of clothing needs for the people of Ukraine. So again, my point being is find something local. The wonderful thing about the local charities helping the people of the Ukraine is that you can meet with them. You can see where the funds are going. There's no mystery involved. But that is my heartfelt pick of the month, is to do everything we can to help the people of the Ukraine. Well, okay, everybody. It's been just an incredible episode number 2. I'll be looking forward to creating episode 3 sometime in the near future. But until then, I thank you for joining us. Thanks, Bill Rao, again. And see you all soon, I hope. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.